It was a fun weekend in the NHL playoffs. If you're a South Florida sports fan, well, the Miami Heat had about the same luck as the Florida Panthers in the respective draft lotteries that have happened over the last week. And a year ago today was a fun day to be a Florida Panther fan. What's up, Florida Panthers Daily? I'm Andrew Sheridan, back here with you on a Monday, May 11th, and we'll get to that game from just a year ago today, as we have been doing right here on Florida Panthers Daily. We go every single day, Monday through Friday, and to kick off all of our shows, we've taken a look back at something that's happened on this day in Florida Panthers history, and that's because of the fun times, the memories that this team brought us over the past 3 seasons, 4 seasons winning a President's Cup, 3 Eastern Conference Finals, 2 Stanley Cups. The list goes on, and that is why we take a look back now that the Panthers aren't playing into May and June, and it does feel a little bit weird. I saw something that Anton Lundell had said right after the season. He's been winning ever since he came to the Florida Panthers. This is the first long, true offseason that Anton Lundell has really had, at least in a really long time, as the Panthers have made the playoffs for 6 straight seasons. How weird does that sound? If you grew up a Florida Panthers fan like I did myself, I'm 23 years old, and it felt like this team was the laughingstock of the NHL for the first 15 of those, 16 years of those. You had a few playoff berths sprinkled in here with first-round exits, but nothing like what we are seeing right now. And that goes down to the front office, building a culture, getting the right head coach in there, getting the right leaders on the ice in there. And we will break down a little bit of the news coming out over the weekend about the Florida Panthers front office coming up in a little bit here on Florida Panthers Daily. If it's your first time tuning in, that subscribe button down below does us a lot of good, helps us keep going here as we move into the offseason and we starting to focus on the NHL draft, but we still keep you up to date on everything going on. We'll look back at what happened over the weekend in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I'll even give you a little best bet for some of the games that we got going on tonight. That comment section down below is always fun too. I love when you get involved here on Florida Panthers Daily. So if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, comment down below. We'll respond to those as people continue to leave comments on our videos down below. Subscribe, comment does a lot of good. 5-star reviews on Spotify and Apple Music. But now let's jump back in the time machine just a little bit. Only 1 year ago today, of course, we've been jumping 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Today, we're going 365 days ago from today, May 11th. And, well, it was the defense and Sergei Bobrovsky, kind of sums up the Panthers the past 3 postseasons, that were able to pick up a huge win at home against the Toronto Maple Leafs. If you remember in this series just a year ago in the second round, the Maple Leafs took Game 1. The Maple Leafs took Game 2. The Panthers were able to win it in overtime in Game 3 in a game where the Panthers came back multiple times from 2 goals in that overtime game. That was just a few days ago, a year ago. And then today, a dominant game from the Florida Panthers. They were able to jump on the scoreboard in the first period thanks to Carter Verhaeghe. Sam Bennett would have the icing on the cake in the third period. And this was a game that Sergei Bobrovsky would be the first star, and he shut out the Toronto Maple Leafs. 23 saves for Bob in between the pipes. Verhaeghe, I mentioned, kicked off the scoring for the Florida Panthers. But it was also a game where Joseph Woll was very good for the Toronto Maple Leafs in net. It was a 2-0 back-and-forth game, no score. We scored 5 minutes into the game, and then there wasn't a score until Sam Bennett lit the lamp 12 minutes into that third period that really ended the game. And it was another physical game in this series. And I just mentioned a minute ago, and we're going to look a little bit and talk a little bit about the Panthers front office coming up here in just a minute on Florida Panthers Daily. But having the identity, having the culture that has been built in South Florida, this was a game that showed it a year ago today with the Panthers beating the Maple Leafs 2-0 365 days ago. And why do I say that? 37 shots to 23. You have that little run and gun of the President's Cup style, the President's Cup winning team, but you have 40 hits. The Panthers were actually out-hit in this game 47-40. But this is because, if you remember last year, Toronto tried to outplay us at our own game. And it works for 2 games. But the culture, the DNA, knowing how to win, that the Florida Panthers proved over the past 2 seasons, it showed in this game. And I've said that a lot when we look back at some of these games, but it's culture wins that give the teams belief that I think if you're a fan, this was the game you were watching, you say, oh shoot, we're really going to go do this again. And the Florida Panthers would go on to do just that. 26 penalty minutes to 27 from the Leafs, if you remember this series. Physical the whole way through, but the Panthers able to ride the back of Sergei Bobrovsky, who got his, I believe it was his 5th shutout. Let me see, I have it here. It was his 5th career playoff shutout for Sergei Bobrovsky a year ago today, and it was the day I, as a fan, and hopefully you as a fan, said this team actually has what it takes to go back to back. Here on Florida Panthers Daily, we talk a lot about the culture in an example like that game 365 days ago. Well, when you win Stanley Cups, people are going to want some of your players. And some reports over the weekend came out that the director of personnel and the director of hockey operations, that some teams have their eyes on them. Brandon Birch is the director of hockey operations for the Panthers, and then the director of player personnel, Brian McCabe, both not necessarily on the chopping block, but have some good opportunities that might arise with different teams around the NHL. McCabe's been with the Panthers since 2012, so he's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. He started with the Panthers as a developmental coach, and then he's been in this director of player personnel role for a long time, and he's got 2 Stanley Cups. So you start looking at some teams. The Devils are the team that really has his name linked to them. Also, the Toronto Maple Leafs. He had a 7-year career in the NHL where he played for Toronto, and you know all the drama that's going on north of the border. And then also, the Devils GM has a great relationship with McCabe because he was the former Panthers assistant GM. So do all these connections of building this culture, building the winning that the Panthers have established over the past few years. Other teams are going to try and go replicate that. That's what all professional sports leagues are. They say it's a copycat league. So people go and pay the Panthers assistant GMs or director of player personnel, and when they hire your friends, now they're going to try and come and get some of their guys as they look to build the same culture that we have here in Florida. But it is tough to do. I'm not saying just because you get these guys in the building, you get a front office like this. You still need the right guys on the ice. They still need to all buy into the system. And most importantly, you got to have a coach willing to be on the same page as all of the players. That's Brian McCabe, but that's not the only one. You also have Brandon Birch. He's the current director of Panthers hockey operations, and he's been with the Panthers since 2016. Which is about when this thing really got kicked off and the Panthers started playing some good hockey. He's been in this role since 2017. He, again, could be on the radar of the Devils, could be on the radar of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Those are kind of the 2 teams right now that, because of the reasons I mentioned, that are kind of wanting to come get some of these new guys to get in to their buildings. We'll see how Bill Zito handles it all. He might be pretty busy trying to retain some of them. He's already lost one of his assistant GMs. Now he's possibly on the way of losing another. So we'll see how he goes about building the NHL roster, but also seeing how he can hold on to some of his assistants and player personnel that is behind the scenes. But there's a reason they're all on the ice when the Panthers win the Stanley Cup. There's a reason that photo is so big, because so much goes in to winning a Stanley Cup, and there's a reason that they say it is the hardest trophy to win in sports. And there's a lot of teams chasing it right now in some great games over the weekend in the NHL. The Carolina Hurricanes brought out the brooms on the Philadelphia Flyers on Saturday. That was a 3-2 overtime winner. The Hurricanes will get some rest. They have yet to lose in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They will get some rest and take on the winner of the Canadiens and the Sabres. That game's in action right now as I am sitting here talking on Florida Panthers Daily. 4-1. The Canadiens are up in that one, so they can jump up 2-1. That barn was rocking in Montreal last night. And then the Wild picking up a big win against the 1-seeded Avalanche. I'm not still worried. I'm not yet worried if I'm an Avalanche fan, but it is kind of funny. You look at who the Avalanche have had to play and their points, and then you look at who the Hurricanes have had to play as the 1 seed. But hey, you can be mad for playing who's on your schedule, playing for who you get in the NHL playoffs, and the Hurricanes taking full advantage of that. The Golden Knights jumped out to a big lead and held on against the Ducks on Friday night. That game is getting ready to drop here. The puck's getting ready to drop in about 30 minutes. And like I said, I'm not too worried about the Colorado Avalanche, but tonight is a big game, a pivotal game in this series in Minnesota. That barn will be bouncing like it was the other night. Tickets, cheapest to get in, $200 in Minnesota. You know it's a hockey state. And my best bet for you, give me the over. I don't like Minnesota at plus 110. It's almost a pick 'em. Vegas might know something. The Wild are a good team. We've seen it a lot in this series. Lots of goals will be scored. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Give me the over as my best bet in tonight's game between the Wild and the Avalanche. That's it for today, Florida Panthers Daily. Leave some comments down below. Subscribe for us here on our YouTube. And until tomorrow, let's go Cats.